Good evening. I'm Brad Bell, President and CEO of MAF Canada. Welcome to MAF Speaks, an interactive live stream focusing on a range of topics of interest to Friends of Mission Aviation Fellowship, as well as the greater aviation and relief and development communities. But first, for those of you who may not know what MAF is, let me tell you a bit about us. Following World War II, a group of military airmen and women had a shared global vision of using aviation to reach isolated communities with help, hope, and healing. 75 years later, what began with just a few people and a single airplane has become a global operation with more than 130 light aircraft operating in over 3 dozen countries around the world. Together, we provide aviation and logistics support to thousands of relief and development agency workers, as well as missionaries and mission doctors, all with the purpose of providing access to some of the most isolated communities in the world.
For over 70 years, this is what we've been doing, getting up early to get out there and fly. What motivates me is just seeing change, being that essential lifeline that makes a huge difference. Every day, it's on the sides of mountains, we're going into the remote bush, we're taking that life wherever we go. When we talk about flying for life, we mean it in the fullest sense of the word. It's not just about food and water and a safe place to live, but it's about health, it's about education, it's about transformation of communities and seeing them thrive, and it's about taking Jesus' love into those places.
MAF was started by a couple of World War II pilots. They'd returned from the war, they'd been using aircraft to drop bombs, and now they could see that aircraft could be used to bring life and to bring hope. It was a very humble beginning, just one aircraft, but that aircraft was fueled by the prayers of many. We are pilots and engineers, we are IT specialists, we are administrators, we are managers, but we're so much more. We're the faithful prayer partners at home, we're the people helping raise the funds. Together we are Mission Aviation Fellowship.
I don't know yet what transformation my flights today will bring. I don't know what transformation every other flight will bring, but I know this, that for every flight we do, we are motivated by flying for life.
From one plane 75 years ago to over 130 today, with every flight we make, we truly are flying for life. We're joined now by Roei Ganzarski, CEO of MAGNIX. Did I get that right, Roei?
MAGNIX.
MAGNIX. I just learned that I was pronouncing it wrong. Roei, it's really good to see you again. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you very much.
Before we get started, tell us a little about yourself and how you came to be the CEO of an experimental aircraft company.
Roei Ganzarski. I'm originally from Israel. Came to the U.S. in 1997 to get my MBA at the University of Washington. Found myself working at the Boeing family of companies for 13 years. And after that, joined a small group of people doing a startup in the software world in a company called Bold IQ that was doing real-time optimization software. Did that close to 7 years, and then got a call out of the blue about this phenomenal company that has just developed an electric motor that they thought might be good for aerospace, and would I like to come and help them turn it into a business. And that was a little over 2 years ago.
Okay. And so what's your personal interest? What's your personal journey been with electric flight? Did you know about it before? Were you always interested in, or did that interest develop as you joined?
Yeah, I had no clue about electric flight. Electric cars were becoming a thing. I really didn't know that it could be done for aerospace because of the challenges of power density, batteries, etc.
Yeah.
But when I saw what this small team of engineers developed in our initial prototype motor, it really hit me like a ton of bricks, as they say, that like, oh my God, this could be real. If this motor actually does what it's supposed to do, and then I went to visit and it did,
Mm-hmm.
we could actually make electric airplanes. And wouldn't that be amazing for both the environment and the economics? And the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. You know, one of the things that really caught my attention when I was visiting you last fall was the company's vision, which loosely paraphrased, I think, is to make aviation affordable, and how that will connect communities. Can you just talk a bit about that? Because we really found that that really gelled well with MAF's mission and vision.
Yeah, so we're really all about, and you said it correctly, connecting communities with affordable, clean air transport. And the reason that's really the mission is because there's things that are much bigger than us around here. I mean, the technology is nice. I mean, we developed some amazing technology, but that technology is an enabler. Electric propulsion for an aircraft in itself is not a right to exist. The question is, what are you going to do with that? And for us, it was really about the connectivity of community that the United States, for example, and worldwide envisioned back in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, when aviation started to be commercial. That's why there's so many airports around the world. And yet economics have driven that far and far away from what the vision was, to a point where, as an example, in North America, we have over 10,000 airports that could be used by airplanes, and yet only 600 are used by the airlines. Why? Because it's way too expensive to operate large jets or large turboprops for commercial use. And what airlines have found is that the bigger the airplane, the more money they can make. Now, I don't mean that as in they're greedy, but airlines operate on very thin margins as is. It's a very tough business. And so if they can make more margin operating bigger planes, then that's what they'll do. The challenge is, the bigger the plane, the bigger the airport you have to go to fill up that plane. Because even as is, they need to fill about 70% of the seats every flight just to break even. And so they can't go to regional airports, small airports, which means the majority of people around the world, even though they may live close to an airport, can't get really good, convenient service from where they're going or to where they're going. And so our goal is to make aviation as cheap as possible so that these smaller aircraft can, in fact, profitably fly in and out of many more airports, provide much more service, maybe even the vision of on-demand aviation for the common person, right? Not for the 1 percentile. And so that's really the goal that we're all striving for.
Yeah, nice. I'm sure there were thousands of challenges that you came across in creating this motor. Can you highlight a few of the larger hurdles that you had to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, and you say there were hurdles. There'll continue to
Okay,
be
there still are.
challenges
Okay.
all the time. That's part of, I tell the team on a regular basis, every time one of these things happen, and you get this moment of, oh, I wish this would have worked, or maybe it should have done better. And I have to remind the team, guys, we're doing something that no one has ever done before, right? Yeah. Commercial electric propulsion just doesn't exist. So it's not like they can look aside and say, oh, let's see how they did it, or let's get ideas from here. It doesn't exist. And so when you're leading the way, when you're creating a new trail, you will get stung by bees, thorns, bushes in your way, smacked by a branch. And so, yeah, a few of the interesting ones we've had. I'll just give you one of the most surprising anecdotal ones. It was the night before our world's first electric commercial flight.
Was that the Beaver up in Vancouver?
Yeah,
okay, yeah.
The night before, they move us into a brand new, painted, beautiful hangar that Harbor Air has there. It's a World War II type hangar, wooden ceilings. I mean, just gorgeous. And they painted the floor because they really wanted it to look nice and, shiny for when the reporters come in the next day and so on. And that was our hangar for first flight. And so we moved the plane from the working hangar, if you will, where we'd been doing all the work up until then.
I saw that hangar. That hangar wasn't pretty.
Yeah, that's a different hangar.
That's correct.
We worked to the nice hangar. We put the plane there. We're about 10 of us there. I'm ready to take the team out to dinner, for a semi-celebratory dinner for the night before the flight. And we plug the charger in, and it says there's a safety error. It's not charging. They go, wait a minute, that's not good. Let's deplug, plug again. Safety error, not charging. So we check the charger, everything's fine. We check the batteries, everything's fine. We check the cables, everything, literally check every single aspect. Everything's fine. Plug it in, doesn't work. So we started thinking, what do we do? Maybe we push it back to the other hangar, which is about 100 meters away. And all the planes that are usually in this nice hangar are now outside in between the two. And it's a seaplane, there's no wheels. So there's no way we can push this thing on the ground back. Because over there it worked. Okay, so what do? We found that we had one of our small trickle chargers still with us that we were using for small systems tests. We said we could plug that in and it worked, except it would take 11 hours to charge the plane.
So how much time did you have?
We had 10 hours and 45 minutes.
Excellent.
And so the team said, okay, all-nighter. And so split into teams of 3 and basically all night charged this thing, 10 hours and 45 minutes. And at 7 a.m., right before the flight, we were at 97% state of charge, ready to fly.
Okay.
So it worked out well, but the question remained, why couldn't we charge? Mm-hmm. After we do the flight and everything's great, we come back and start to develop some theories. And then we found out the problem was the new paint on the floor. The seaplane, because it doesn't, a regular plane has rubber wheels, right, that disconnect the plane from the floor, creating grounding of the electricity.
Did the paint conduct electricity?
The paint created enough distance between the ground and the plane for the plane and the charger to think that the plane was not grounded. And if it's not grounded, it's not going to submit 800 volts of power to charge up that plane.
Right.
And that was the safety issue, that the paint was thick enough and new enough to create the illusion, if you will, for the delicate electronics, that it wasn't grounded. Now, The good thing is the safety features worked. Not grounded, don't charge. The bad thing is it was because of paint. So we learned a very tough lesson on things that had nothing to do with the electric propulsion itself. So that was kind of one funny anecdotal story about challenges that we face.
Yeah. Yeah, and you would, as you say, you would not see that coming. You would never expect that.
Never.
Yeah. Interesting. So for those of you that haven't seen the motor, I'm just going to switch to a screen here for a minute. Roy, can you see the picture of the motor?
Yep, that's our smaller version of the motor. Yep.
Correct. The bigger version is sort of 2 of those, kind of.
Yep.
And then I'll just move, and this is the one of the power control units.
Yep.
And I still marvel at this about the design. When new products come to market, they often, or in my experience, almost always go through what I call an ugly duckling stage. So they work, but they look terrible. So I wanted to give you some examples. This was one of my first cell phones, a Trio 650, plastic, right? I mean, it worked, but barely. If you dropped it, that was the end of it. Pretty clunky, compared to my current phone with no buttons, Gorilla Glass, like really sleek, and then of course the old VCRs when they came out, right? And then now these sleek, slim Blu-ray players. So I just wanted to ask you, how did you how did you guys do such a good job of effectively producing a first generation motor that is just so elegant in design?
Well, there's a few parts to that. One, part of our philosophy is actually that things need to look good to function well. At the end of the day, we all make purchases emotionally, right? Clearly, the price has to be right, the functionality has to be there, etc. But we really get drawn as people emotionally to a product, a service, doesn't matter what it is, to make that purchase. And by the way, it doesn't matter if you're buying it for yourself or you're a purchaser for a company, you're buying it on behalf of the company. At the end of the day, it's an emotional decision. And one of the things that's important to us is to make sure that they don't have to be, the most beautiful thing in the world, but they have to be aesthetically pleasing to the eye. They have to be alluring and kind of enticing for someone to say, oh, what is that box? What's in that box? How does that box work in the case of the inverter or the motors? And so that was a key element or an important element for our design. The second thing is one of the really nice things about electric propulsion and electric inverters is that you do have more flexibility because of their simplicity. You have more flexibility to be a little more creative and do things kind of right, if you will, when you want to. And so that's the result of what you see.
Yeah.
I will say, though, one thing that I really admire in our team is the ability not to think outside the box, but to simply not see a box when it comes to design. And that's one of our cultural values. Don't think outside the box, just don't see a box at all. And the inverter, for example, that you show, the Magni Drive, is one of those examples. When we challenged our team to build the world's most powerful, lightweight, advanced aviation inverter, the first question of all the aerospace guys were, okay, what are the rules? It's like, no rules. Okay, what are the limits? No limits. What are the restrictions? No restrictions. If you had a dream world, what would your inverter look like, have, be size, etc.? And they came out with something much smaller than what that image shows. By the way, that inverter is 170 kilowatts and weighs a little under 12 kilograms.
Mm-hmm.
To give you an example, and it's an aerospace grade inverter designed to go up to 33,000 feet. The closest thing to it is a 45 kilowatt inverter that weighs a little over 12 kilograms. And that's done by one of the leading inverter companies in aerospace today in the world. And the only reason we could do what we did was that kind of philosophy from our team that said, think about a world which has no rules. Now build what you would build. Then they designed it. And then we said, now let's start applying aerospace, FAA, regulatory, reliability rules onto it. And of course, the box started to grow. But when you're growing from such a small starting point, the incremental gains you get are tremendous versus starting from, here's what we're limited to, let's try and make it a little better. And that's the type of philosophy we take with every one of our systems that we develop.
Well, I mean, both those components look beautiful. I remember walking into your foyer, which is also a showroom. They're both on display, and I mean, you're just drawn to them because they're simplistic, but they just look amazing. So while we're talking about the motor, you mentioned that motor that I showed, the image was the baby one. Just talk a bit about that. You've got two motors, and I think when I met you, there was a third that was being envisioned. But just talk a bit about those two motors.
Yeah, so the two propulsion systems we have are called the Magni 250 and the Magni 500. The Magni 250 is what you saw in the image. It can create 280 kilowatts steady state, 350 kilowatts max takeoff power. So you could push it even more. And we may or may not be able to do even more than that, but let's keep it at the 280 and 350 for now.
Right.
The Magni 500 is double that. 560 kilowatts continuously and 640 is max takeoff weight. Now that's tremendous, and they weigh about a third of what a traditional internal combustion engine for that power level would weigh. So there's a few really interesting aspects about these propulsion systems that really provide value to operators. One is, and if you want to put back kind of that picture, that image, I can.
Yeah, keep talking, and then I'll pop it up.
Yeah, our motors are designed with multiple three-phase segments in them. So imagine that Magni 250 that you showed there that we'll see here in a second. It's not one single motor. It's actually two small motors inside that package, independently controlled, each one by a separate controller that you show the Magni Drive. Now, why is that important? We enable graceful degradation of power. In an internal combustion engine, be it your car or an airplane, when there's a fault inside that engine, basically the practice is shut that engine down and then glide to safety if you're a single engine plane, or use the remaining engine for a dual engine to try and land safely. In our technology, the way we've done it is, and you can do this with electric propulsion, is if there's a fault internally, our controller will identify in which of the two segments in this case, or in the Magni 500, 4 independent segments, in which of the segment there's that fault, shut that segment down, leaving the pilot, in the case of the Magni 250, 50% full power. And since we can overclock it, to use a computer term, you can get even more than 50% power. If you're in the Magni 500, you'll have 75% power. Another fault, go to 50%. Another fault, go to 25%. So imagine if you're a pilot in a situation that's an unfortunate fault, instead of a black or white, turn the whole thing off and glide to safety in an aircraft like the Caravan or a Beaver, here you get graceful degradation of power. So you can, with full power and control, land that plane safely and not have to rely on gliding. So that's one aspect that we really like, that we've designed into this, the graceful degradation. The second is the fact that our propulsion system provides its full power that I mentioned. In this case, the Magni 250 at 280 or 350 kilowatts, or 560 and 640 for the Magni 500, full power at only 1,900 RPM.
That really caught, if you'll remember, that really caught the attention of our engineers. As soon as you said that, they were listening intently.
Yeah, and so why is that really attractive? Guess what? The propeller of these planes, these turboprop or piston airplanes, turns at about 1,900 RPM. The propeller can't turn much faster, because if it does, the tips of the propeller may go faster than the speed of sound, and thus destroy the propeller. And that's, of course, something we don't want. So propellers are limited by speed. Traditional engines turn at 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 RPM to create their power. But if you have to turn a propeller that's at 1,900 RPM, then what do you add? You add this heavy, maintenance-prone, expensive reduction gearbox to take the thousands of RPMs down to 1,900. Well, the nice thing is our motors turn at 1,900 RPM. So that means direct connection, shaft to propeller, no gearbox, less cost, less weight, less maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another really cool part that we've developed here. The third is that the electric motor requires no air. We don't require any air to create the power here. An internal combustion engine, how does it work? It takes fuel, it takes air, mixes them together in a really confined space, lights them up, and that creates the explosion that creates then the thrust, right? Turning turbines or moving pistons.
And subsequently, they develop different power at different altitudes.
Exactly. So the higher you go, the less dense the air is. Or conversely, the hotter the day, the less dense the air is. So the same engine in a hot day will provide less power. The same engine, as it climbs to altitude from sea level, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 feet, loses more and more of its power, because there's less of these, one of the two elements required, there's less of. That's why we have what's called high hot operations. A lot of planes can't fly into high altitude airports in the summer. The electric motors we've developed don't require air. So that means that they have the same power level at sea level or at 15 or 20,000 feet. The same power on a cold day or a hot day. So suddenly your operations are much more flexible and less restricted because of those aspects. So there's a lot of really cool things that an electric propulsion system can provide, beyond the fact that it doesn't need fuel, doesn't create emission, right? The obvious ones.
Yeah. And it's, I asked this when I saw you in the fall, but I forget the answer. And this is probably a little bit oversimplistic, but is the bigger engine effectively two small engines attached?
On the inside, kind of. So I mentioned the Magni 250 is two separate segments. The Magni 500 is four separate segments. So it's kind of the
because it sure looks that way.
Technology is the same. Yeah. Oh, it looks very similar. I mean, if it looks good, why change it? Just put it, double the size. And so that's the idea.
Yeah, cool. You mentioned earlier about FAA approval and that, and I know you guys are going for your FAA Part 33 certification. How's that going?
So far, so good. We're in the midst of that now. We've done, I've done all the paperwork. We're going back and forth with the FAA on the various aspects of the certification. So we're in the midst of that now. We expect to start the formal FAA testing here fairly soon, which, as you can imagine, is a lengthy process in which we have to prove to the FAA and, of course, to ourselves in the industry that the system is as good, as reliable, as safe as any other engine out there. We are pretty confident that it will be better because of the various aspects of how we've designed it and the fact that it's electric. But that's the proof that we have to put in. So there's all sorts of tests that you go through, all the way from endurance testing to see how long and how well this thing works, all the way to some destruction tests that you basically destroy either elements or the entire motor to kind of see what is that breaking point, if you will.
Right. So once you get that, what does it look like beyond that? What are the next steps? Like, for example, could I order a Caravan from Cessna and from the factory get a MAGNIX motor as an option?
One day I hope so, but not yet.
No, not yet.
MAGNIX has three paths that we envision going to market with. The closest or shortest term one is what we call magnification of existing aircraft. So what we're doing with Harbor Air, for example,
Yes.
they're an airline, a phenomenal airline, by the way, out of Vancouver, British Columbia. They also do their own maintenance, their own work, and their own modifications on airplanes. So with them, we did the first modification of their Beaver, turned it into the E-Beaver, and that's flying around today doing test flights as part of their preparation for the aircraft certification beyond our certification of the propulsion system itself. So that's one path to market, going to operators, integrators, etc., and converting, magnifying existing older aircraft and giving them a new lease on life, if you will, lower cost, cleaner, more efficient, etc. That's one. The second path is brand new OEMs, companies that are designing clean sheet electric airplanes from scratch. One of those examples are our launch customer, Aviation, a company out of Israel that's developing the Alice. It's an all-electric aircraft from scratch, as opposed to the Caravan, for example, when magnified, that will take 9 people about 100, 150 miles. The Alice will take 9 people over 500 miles because it's not restricted by the space like a Caravan is. It's designed to be an electric plane. So that's the second path to market. The third path to market, which we know will come, is just a matter of when, because we think customers will push it, is the example you gave. Existing OEMs who will offer what we call inline options for their customers. So someone who wants to come and buy a Caravan off the line, or maybe a King Air or an Otter, and says, hey, I want this plane, but I'm really okay with a shorter distance because I don't fly more than 100, 150, 200 miles with my operation. So I like the electric version. And can I buy that from the manufacturer as opposed to buy the airplane with the internal combustion engine only to then magnify
take it out. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are the 3 paths we envision to market.
Yeah, good. We have a short video to play. Roy, I know you've seen this a million times, but there will be some viewers that won't have seen this. This is the test flight, which was exciting to watch, of the Caravan. So let me just switch to that, and here we go. Yeah, very cool. That, I'm sure that was
It never gets old. It never gets old.
I'm sure that was an exciting day. Can you just tell us, just give us a bit of a taste of what that was like? Because I know you were there and commentating, and yeah.
So first of all, when you look at that video and I listen to the music, that was very intentional. You know, sometimes videos you like to put like the serene music of the airplane gliding in the air. We chose that kind of bouncy, energetic music to go with that video because that's what that day was like. It was just so full of energy. We didn't have a lot of people there, clearly, right? It's during this COVID-19 situation, so we had a very small number of people, all wearing masks, social distancing. It was good that it was at Moses Lake, so everyone had plenty of room to kind of spread out and watch it.
Yeah.
But the energy was so contagious because you have years of work, years of frustration, challenges, vision, nights, weekends, being away from family, all culminating in this flight of what ended up being the world's largest commuter/commercial aircraft flying all electric against everyone in industry who said that simply can't be done. Not in that timeline, not with these batteries, not with today's propulsion. It's way too big. A 2-passenger plane, maybe. When we did the Beaver, then it was, well, maybe the Beaver, 5 passengers. the Cessna Grand Caravan. I mean, that's a brand name in any aviation household. And to see that thing take off was so exciting because it suddenly made it not just real, because the eBeaver made it real, but it made it to where it was real at a mega scale, right? It was jumping up a notch to a 9-passenger aircraft. The Caravan is the second most prominent aircraft worldwide, be it for cargo, passenger operations, for what we define as the middle mile distances. And so to see that thing fly, and it's an airplane that's in production today. So it's not the Beaver that's 62 years old and no one produces anymore. This is an in-production aircraft. So it suddenly kind of clicked for us and for everyone else that, wow, this is actually going to happen and is happening. And that was the first flight of many. One of the ones right after that was a flight that we climbed to 8,000 feet, which was tremendous because one of the things that aren't necessarily known, except for people who deal in electronics and aerospace, is that as you go up in altitude, electronics that are not in a pressurized area, meaning they're stayed in low altitude, have elements like corona effect, the other corona, not the COVID-19 corona, arcing, various elements that if not designed correctly can pose a hazard with electronics. We flew to 8,000 feet and knock on wood, everything was flawless and perfect. And it did what it was supposed to do. It climbed without being impacted by altitude. It cruised beautifully. The power was fantastic. So that Cessna flight, the first one and the subsequent ones, really are not just a proof of we can do it. It's a proof that the industry can do it and actually benefit.
Mm-hmm. It sure got our attention because, I mean, the Caravan is just one of MAF's most beloved aircraft. It's just a workhorse, right?
It is.
And there were lots of eyes watching that. One of the biggest challenges that you and I have talked about before is battery technology, and I mean, really, at this point, one might even say it's the Achilles heel. Can you tell me a bit about where that technology is today, and where you see that technology being in a year or two's time?
Yeah, you're right. Batteries are today the limitation, but there's two parts to the answer of the question that you asked. The first is there is truly a chicken and egg situation when it comes to airplane batteries. And what do I mean by that? And it's very, if you look 8-9 years back at Tesla, it's the exact same story. If you went to a battery company and said, hey, why don't you develop a good battery for an airplane? The question would be, what airplane? There's no electric plane. Why would I invest any time or money in that? Oh, okay, let's go to the airplane company. Hey, why don't you guys build an electric airplane? So, well, for what propulsion system? Show me a propulsion system that can pick up an airplane, then I'll do the airplane. So we have to start with propulsion. Everything in aerospace, by the way, is designed around propulsion. There's a reason today's aviation age is called the jet age. It's because of the jet engine that allowed swept wing, faster, higher altitude, more payload. So propulsion drives aerospace. So we have to start with propulsion. Once we have propulsion, then we can do things like the Caravan, the Beaver, the Alice. Now battery companies are saying, oh, wait a minute, this is real. Now I see electric airplanes flying. Now I'm going to start working on batteries for airplanes. So that's in fact happening. And over the last 18 months, and definitely the last 9 months since we started flying, we're seeing exponential growth in interest in batteries for aviation. That's one. Two, I thank Elon Musk and Tesla for launching this whole electric transportation industry, because the amount of investment and work going into batteries because of electric cars is tremendous. To give you an example, when we bought our batteries for the eBeaver and then the eCaravan, we were at about 140, 150 watt hours per kilogram for that pack. Today, and that was a year ago when we bought them. Today, August of 2020, we're talking to at least 2 battery companies that can offer batteries at over 400 watt hours per kilogram. Yeah. That's in August, a year later. Yeah. And that's not because of airplanes, right? That's because of cars and the rest of the transportation industry that's going on. And so the technology, the chemistries, be it lithium ion is the kind of most base case, but now the lithium sulfur, lithium air, lithium metal, solid state, of course, hydrogen fuel cell developments, they're rapidly progressing because the world is figuring out this electric thing is actually real and it's good. The grid is getting more and more renewable. Refining oil is still dirty and it will never be better. And so people are catching on to this aspect of environmental awareness and cost consciousness, and that electric transportation actually serves both of those. So today, we're already at over 400 watt hours per kilogram at the cell level, about 300 at the pack level, which means it's double the range, double the payload than what it was just a year ago.
Yeah, when I met you in the fall, you had said, build it and the battery companies will come.
And they're coming in droves. Yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, that's cool. As you know, MAF operates in places where getting fuel is just a real issue, and so much so that we've retired a lot of our aircraft that use avgas because it's just too hard to get. It's too expensive.
Right.
Because of that, we're keen to explore emerging technologies that can provide safe and cost-effective flight, not to mention environmentally safer and cleaner options. But the challenge is in some of these same places that I'm talking about, electricity is also expensive or sometimes unreliable. What charging options do you see that MAF will have in some of these more remote places?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so in the remote places that you guys operate, for example, Africa, Southeast Asia, they are very remote, but they're also very sunny. There's usually or many times a lot of rivers. It gets windy during peak seasons or during various seasons. And so all these renewable capabilities are coming into their own, if you will, or maturing themselves. Here in Washington State, where we are, over 77% of power is renewable. British Columbia, I think it's over 90% is renewable. And so it will require investments in these remote locations, right? Solar panels across a landing strip, wind turbines in hilly areas or where there's a strong gusts, perhaps hydro power that comes in these rivers. But once that initial investment is made, the return that provides is tremendous. Now, the nice thing, if you think of solar, let's say, I would be the first to say, if you came with an airplane and connected to a solar panel, it would take you days to recharge, right? Not practical. But what if we did something a little different? What if we said, let's have a battery pack, a second battery pack, sitting at the airport, trickle charging through solar throughout the day, right? It's not like you guys, or anyone for that matter, is going to do 10 flights a day to the same location, one after the other, right? You do a few flights a day to this airport, a few flights a day to another airport. So you could have one or more battery packs on the ground being charged slowly, securely, efficiently, life expanding for the battery type of way through solar, wind, hydro, etc. And then when the plane arrives, charge from that battery to the airplane battery. I'm not even talking about the added complexity of battery swapping, but just charging from one battery to the other is rapid. Then the plane leaves, the battery continues to trickle charge from the solar panels. And so there are logistical ways to do that that make every landing strip self-contained and self-sufficient. There are airports today in Australia, for example, that are completely self-sufficient when it comes to electricity because they put solar panels to the length of the runway, which is basically space that no one's going to drive into them or anything like that. The length of the runway, now they create power for the airport. And so there are a lot of really cool solutions on that.
Yeah, I think when I was at your offices out back, there was a trailer that was effectively filled with batteries that was that, portable charging unit on wheels effectively.
Exactly. So the nice thing about what we designed there is under the notion of it doesn't even have to be in a remote location. It could be, or in a different developing country. It could be here in the United States or in Canada at a small airfield that wants to have once a day an electric aircraft come in there to take some commuters or twice a day, but it doesn't have the infrastructure, let's say, to charge. Great. Let's have this trailer. We have a trailer that we developed, as you saw, filled with batteries that can be charged anywhere and then trailer to that airport, charge the airplane, then trailer them back. Now, the nice thing about that idea, that concept is you could trailer that to a wind turbine, for example. There are a lot of places that we go to and we see that have these phenomenal wind turbines or hydro capabilities, and they're turned off. And you think to yourself, why is that turned off? That's free electricity. Well, it's turned off because, as I said, Washington is 77% renewable, but not 100%. The rest of that percentage, and it's the same if you go worldwide, if you're not 100% renewable, the rest of that power comes from coal-based, gas-based, etc. They are very inflexible in their ability to create less power, which means if you have more renewable And the return is you have to reduce the amount of power you create by coal. You can't, because there are big blocks that you can either turn in all or nothing, off or on these power generators. And so what do they do instead? They turn off the renewable ones, because those are easy to turn off. Just turn off the wind turbine and you're not creating power because there's nowhere to store that power. Imagine if you had these trailers of batteries coming up to this wind tunnel or wind turbine that's going to be turned off anyway, and say, hey, don't turn it off, keep it on, fill up my airplane batteries. Then that trailer disperses to various smaller airports and fills up airplanes. So again, there are a lot of these great opportunities that if as a network we work together, aviation can truly become clean throughout the entire value chain.
What is the charge to flight time right now? What are you experiencing now? And then what do you think that might look like a little bit in the future?
Yeah, so right now, if you use the equivalent of like a Tesla supercharger, one of those really big 400 kilowatt chargers, you can do about a 1-to-1, which means you fly for 20 minutes, you charge for 20 minutes. In our own operations, for example, since we don't have a hurry for turn time, we have a smaller charger. We're at about 1-to-3. So a 20-minute flight takes us about an hour plus to charge. But as these chargers get better and the ability to charge the batteries advances, because again, it's technology, that could rapidly decrease. I don't think we'll get to a point, unless we're doing battery swapping, I don't think we'll get to a point where you can charge as fast as you can fuel. But the question then becomes, are you willing to wait another 5, 10, 20 minutes to do something in a clean fashion versus fueling very quickly? That comes with its own, fuel spills, emissions, etc.
Yeah, and I remember the example with Harbor Air. I think they're roughly looking at a 1-to-1 charge to flight time, but because their flights are shorter, the extra charge time didn't matter because it takes a while to offload people and cargo, and like it was kind of a non-event. So
exactly, you take an example, even cargo operators. A lot of cargo operators will fly, a FedEx feeder, a DHL feeder, etc. They'll wait for the big 75, 76, 777 cargo plane to arrive in the evening. It'll offload all of its packages to all these small planes, these small props. They'll fly 20, 30 minutes, an hour to the small regional airport, offload their packages, and then wait 4, 6, 8 hours until the reverse cycle starts, where all the packages have been collected from the sending points. The trucks arrive at the airport, load the small plane so it can fly back and load the big plane. So a lot of these planes on the cargo side are sitting on the ground for hours at a time anyway. So there you don't even need to use a supercharger. You could use a regular one, charge at a 1-to-4 basis, and it's still good enough.
Yeah, MAF might need that Tesla supercharger because I've been flying with our pilots, and boy, they don't sit on the ground very much. So I know you know a bit about us. We're the world's largest operator of, we have the world's largest private small fleet, and MAF is an expensive organization to operate. And some of the people who use our services, for example, medevacs, these are the people who can least afford those expensive flights. And so as a result, we rely so much on really generous donors to help us offset all of those costs. What do our donors need to know about electric flight and what it could mean for the future of MAF?
Yeah, I think your donors need to know 2 basic things: 0 fuel, 0 emissions. Now, that's a nice statement, 4 words, but what does it really mean to your donor? As a donor, when they're giving you money, I believe they're giving it to the mission, right? Providing healthcare services, medicine, food to the needy, to people who really need it. Imagine you're coming to this remote and a lot of times pristine, beautiful place, and you're coming to provide these people with food, and you're saying, by the way, in the meantime, I'm going to pollute your air. When you come pick up my food, I'm going to give you some emissions so you can really smell that fuel of the modern world coming out at you. Imagine if you could do that with 0 emissions. You're coming to pick up a patient for medevac, and while you're bringing the patient with lung problems in, you're spewing the air around them with emissions. Imagine being able to do that cleanly, without any noise, without any emissions coming out. The cost of operations are going to be between 40 to 80% lower per hour. because you're not spending fuel. Electricity is so much cheaper. But more importantly, there's hardly any maintenance on an electric motor. Many of your donors, I assume, have an electric car or have at least driven in one. I have one. You don't take those into service. There is no service. There's no oil change, filter change, spark plugs. All that doesn't exist. Belts, there's nothing. And so the maintenance is minuscule. And maintenance is a huge cost of operations when running an airplane.
Indeed,
and
yeah.
so from your donor's perspective, they can know that every dollar they give you, now instead of 40% of it going to fuel and maintenance, it's actually going to provide services and better services to your own recipients. So I think those are the two key elements that they should know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Thank you. My last question, and you've been great to hang in this long. I think I originally promised you a 10-minute interview. So my last question is a bit more forward-looking, and that is, what do you think the future looks like for electric aviation in 5 to 10 years? So pick a time frame that's out there, and I don't just mean for MAGNIX, but just the industry as a whole.
I think that by 2025, 5 years from now, you'll be seeing hundreds of electric planes doing the short middle mile routes of anywhere between 50 to 500 miles. Hundreds of them, specifically here in North America first, just because it's the easiest, if you will, place to start, but you'll see hundreds. By 2030, you're going to see thousands of these small propeller planes flying all electric worldwide, doing 50 to 500 miles in range. By 2035, you're going to be seeing two things. The majority of all flights under 1,000 miles are going to be electric, but with small planes, and aircraft of 50 passengers are going to start flying electric as well, in the distances of 50 to 500 miles.
Because of what you were talking about earlier, that last comment about it being so much more economical to fly the smaller planes. And maybe hit on demand.
Yeah, exactly. It's more economical and it gives you more flexibility. Think today what COVID has added to the two things pushing electric aviation. One has always been the requirement or the move of our economy to an on-demand economy. Thanks to Amazon, Shopify, Uber, we're all used to pressing a button and something shows up when we want it, where we want it, except for one industry, aviation. Aviation, you go to the airport that the airline has chosen for you, even if it's 45 minutes or an hour away. You fly when they tell you they want to fly, and you pay them what they decide to pay. And so it's supply driven. The rest of the world has become demand driven. Why? Because of costs. Reduce the cost of operation, maybe airplanes can become more and more demand driven. So that's one. The second is environmental awareness. People have become aware that airplanes contribute 2 to 4% of worldwide CO2, and that's not good. It's not good for the environment. It's not good for our health. Greta Thunberg in Sweden has started this phenomenal movement of flight shaming. Whether we like it or not, it's taking hold. 10% reduction in in ticket sales for airplanes in Scandinavia for flight shaming. Go to electric. There is no flight shaming on the current day. It'll be flight pride because I flew in an electric airplane that did nothing to the environment. But to those two things now add what I believe COVID-19 has created. If I have to fly now, and it's a short distance, if I have to fly to London, I'm pretty restricted. But if I'm going to fly 30 minutes, an hour and a half, do I really want to go to a major hub airport with thousands of other people standing in line, for security, only to fly 45 minutes and get to another mega hub airport and drive another hour to my destination and pay a lot of money? I would rather personally, and I know a lot of other people would as well, drive 15 to 20 minutes to a small airfield with 5, 10, 20 other people, not even have to wait in security lines because the pilot will be able to, under 19 seats, do that. Get on the same 45-minute flight and land 20 minutes away from my destination with minimal risk of any infections, disease, or anything else for that matter, let alone convenience. And so between those three things, the move towards electric, I think, is going to be even more aggressive than it is today, and thus the push to larger and larger aircraft as well.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, Roei, it's really good to see you again. I really appreciate your time. I really did promise this guy about a 10-minute interview, so
no problem at all. It's been fun.
And I really look forward to seeing how our two organizations are going to work together. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Very cool. Thank you.